Okay, today we will be doing the poem called My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Now, a little bit of context about the poem. So, the poem is written by a poet who was very interested in Italian history. And he was basically married to a woman whose father was very abusive of her. And because of the abuse, they had to elope to Italy, right? Because they had to escape her tyrannical father and could not remain in England. So when Browning was in Italy, he used to study paintings, and he studied a painting of a very cold, arrogant Renaissance prince, and also it was inspired from what he later read about the prince. So that inspired him to write this poem, where it's basically a dramatic monologue, and it's based on the Duke of Ferrara. Now, Ferrara is an Italian city, and it's obviously a made-up duke. It's not a real person, but it's based on this prince's character. Now, in a dramatic monologue, the true nature of a person comes out. It really exposes you as a person. So in this monologue, the Duke is talking about his wife, the last Duchess, and kind of pointing out all her characteristics as a person. And through that, his own characteristics are pointed out. So it's definitely a poem of women and how women were treated in the past. Okay. Okay. So we look at the title first, My Last Duchess. Now the word my is a possessive pronoun, right? So he's using a possessive pronoun there to indicate that this woman was his, it belonged to him. It's sort of like he's referring to her as an object. And he's saying last, so it could refer to the fact that he had many wives before. And this is his most recent one, right? Then below his name it says Ferrara, meaning that just referring to the Duke of Ferrara. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. So it sounds like he's talking to someone. He's pointing to a picture on the wall, obviously painted, and he's saying that. So you don't call a person that. You call a person, this woman or this lady, she, her. You don't use the word that. That is very objectifying. It shows that he sees women as collectibles, like art. Is looking as if she were alive. So she's painted so beautifully that it almost looks like she's alive, right? And this is obviously irony, it's ambiguity, because his wife is actually dead. It points to the fact that his wife is dead, right? So there's double meaning there. I call that piece a wonder now. Again, that piece is referring to his wife as a possession, as an object. When he says the word now, he's indicating that maybe before he didn't regard her highly. But now, because, she's fixed in one place, she's in a portrait, she's frozen in time, she's perfect. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Now, Fra Pandolf is a made-up artist in his mind, obviously. And in the past, like if you had an artist to draw you or paint you, it would be a thing of status. So here he's boastful, right? He's boasting about this artist. And ironically enough, he's insinuating, he's passively indicating that Fra Pandolf was, there was something going on between him and his wife. And you'll see what I mean as we read through it. The word Frau means monk in Italian, and a monk is someone who's very sincere, very religious, and to claim that the Frau is having an affair is just an unbelievable claim, right? It's very stupid. Will it please you sit and look at her? So again, you're sitting and looking at her like she's an object. Now he's talking to the person who is showing the displays to. I said, Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you, that pictured countenance, the depth and the passion of its earnest grace. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. So he says here that people would look at the picture. People would be so mesmerized by this picture. They would look with depth and passion, with the most earnest glance, because it was such a beautiful painting, and it also had a lot of mystery in it. And then he said they would turn to him and say, obviously they had to ask permission first to see the picture, because he would hide the picture behind a curtain. This indicates he was very, very controlling. Even when she was probably dead, even her photo, even her portrait, he didn't allow any man to see that. They had to ask permission first. And seemed as they would ask me, but if they dare ask me to look at her, then they would have such a glance, right? Such a glance of passion and depth. Because, and then he goes on to say, so not the first are you to turn and ask thus. So you're not the first person to turn and ask me what the portrait is about. The word durst basically means dare. So this indicates it's threatening. It's a threatening tone that people actually feared the man, right? The Duke. Sir, 'twas not a husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say. So here, just to give you a little bit of context, he's saying she's basically blushing right in the photo. And he looks at her blushing cheeks and he says, that spot of joy. Now, spot, the connotation, the meaning behind spot here is like a blemish, an impediment, like a problem, right? Something disgusting. Instead of, it's his wife, she's blushing. He should admire her. It should be endearing, but in fact, he's just disgusted. So he's saying that perhaps that Fra Pandolf had something to do with that. Maybe he said something to cause her to blush. Maybe something like, her mental laughs over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half blush that dies along her throat. So you can see how he's imagining this artist to really, lust upon this woman and tell her to pick up her sleeve so that more of her skin could show, right? Such stuff. Okay, now this is a turning point of the poem, because here it really shows his true character, his true nature really just reveals itself here. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. So here he's saying he's very, very annoyed with her blushing. Right? He feels like she just thinks she has too much of manners, and he's annoyed with that. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. So she was like very naive. Everything made her very easily happy. You can see he's a very evil, miserable person within. Right? He's not a happy person, and he doesn't like that she's happy. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. So 'twas all one. So what's ironic here is that he's saying that she never lowered her gaze. She would look at all the men, right? So he's jealous, and you can't even believe him because he's making up lies along the way. And what's ironic is that now he hears her behind a curtain, and no one gets to control what she looks at, right? So ultimately, he has taken control of her. My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west. So he's just describing all the things he really hates about this woman, which are actually really awesome things. She loves the sunrise, the sunset, the dropping of the daylight. The bough of cherry some officious fall broke in the orchard for her. So he hates it. He hates that she just gets so happy when someone brings her a basket of cherries. The white mule she rode with round the terrace. So he hates that. He hates that she loves that so much. All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. So everything she'd done made her so happy, so content, it even made her blush. Then he goes on to say, she thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of 900 years old name with anybody's gift. So here it really shows how she treats everyone as an equal. So just as how she treated her husband, she treated the men who brought the cherries from the orchard. She treated them equally, with kindness, right? With humanness, humility. So here it shows how incredibly proud and pretentious he is and how much he expects of her. It's like irrational behavior because in an unhealthy or toxic relationship, the other person just expects you to know what they want without even communicating that to you, right? How do you know what someone needs, what their wants and needs are if they don't communicate that to you? You're not a fortune teller, you can't, or mind reader, you can't just figure that out on your own. They need to talk to you about it. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Now here, his pompous, prideful, narcissistic, egoistic nature really shows itself. Because he says, I would never stoop so low to ever complain about this to her. The word stoop is going to come up a lot, and it indicates that he's very aware of his hierarchy, he's very aware of his status in society. He feels that it's below him to tell her how to behave. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such as one, and say, just this or that, and you disgust me. Here you miss, or they exceed the mark. So here he's saying, even if I have the skill to chastise you, right, to complain, to criticize, which I don't. Now, this is very ironic because do you think he doesn't speak well? Absolutely not. He's lying. This entire poem is written in iambic pentameter. It's something that great poets like Shakespeare only could accomplish, right? And it's a dramatic monologue. It's amazing. So it shows that he's very, very skilled in speech. So here we can't trust him because now he's lying. We can't trust anything he's saying. And then he talks about how she disgusts him. It just shows how unjust and irrational this man is, because what we know about how he's described her, we cannot pick any fault here. She is just such a kind woman, and he is the complete opposite. He's judgmental, he is negative, he is the antithesis, which basically means complete opposites of what she is. They are not two peas in the pod. They are not a match made in heaven. They are basically not alike at all. And if she let herself be less than so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. So here again, he's using the word stooping, and he's saying that I would never ever confront her with this, because obviously I'm a very noble gentleman, and it would be below me to do so. Here he treats her like a child, because he says, if only she lessened herself, if only she dimmed her light, right? She allowed herself to be advised and taught by me. She would be benefited. That's not how your partner speaks to you. That's how your teacher or your father or whatever, some teacher-like relationship in your life, not your partner. Your partner is meant to be your best friend. So he just feels it's really beneath him. Then he says, "Oh, sir," she smiled. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile? So here again, showing his insecurity, jealousy. He's saying that every time she passed someone else, another man or whatever, she was smiling, and when she passed me, she had the same smile, meaning that why didn't she treat me superior to all of them? Why were we all treated the same way? Right? So obviously you can see he's very psychopathic here. He wants to be put on a pedestal. He wants to be admired all the time. He wants to be given undue praise. Will it please, oh, sorry, where am I? This grew. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. So here, it's an extremely sinister tone because you thought it was evil, now it gets the worst kind of evil. So he's saying the screw, meaning she kept on doing these annoying things that just bugged me so much. And then I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped. So what kind of commands did he give that all her smiling stopped? Here it's insinuating that he killed her, because then he says there she stands as if alive. So she's alive in the picture, but that's about it, right? So it's sinister. It's very, very evil. He's basically a murderer, and he's openly confessing this in a conversational tone. How disgusting. Then he goes on to say, will it please you rise? So he's telling the person who's with him, he totally changes the subject after admitting to murder, confessing. He changes the subject and he asks him, can we move on now, right? We'll meet the company below then, I repeat. The Count, your master's known magnificence, is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed. So this is actually a really sad part because we can see that the Count's messenger has been brought to speak to the Duke about a marriage proposal to the Count's daughter. So this Duke will be getting now married again, imagine. And the same cipher is going to continue, and he says, the master's known magnificence, meaning that the master is very generous in giving money. So in those times, they used to give dowry, where the man, the husband would give father, the daughter's father, the wife's father dowry. And he says that I am very generous. No amount will be too less for me. Again, showing status, showing pomp, showing his bragging, right? Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. So he's saying, from the beginning, all I care about is the daughter, my object, meaning this is my next possession, right? Which is extremely horrible. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming the seahorse throughout a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So here, he walks down with a messenger towards a bronze statue of Neptune, the god of the sea, and he's basically taming a seahorse. And he says that another guy, made-up guy, the Klaus of Innsbruck's, who probably had a high status in society, so he's bragging that this guy made it for him, right? Now, there's a metaphor going on here. Neptune was a god of the sea, and he's taming a seahorse. Just like the Duke believes men should tame women. He's comparing women to animals like the horse, and he's comparing men to Neptune, to the god, right? It just shows what a high status men had in those times. Women were basically animalistic. They were seen as animals. What happens if you don't tame, if you don't keep a wild horse under control? It will cause havoc. It will cause chaos, right? It might hurt people, right? So just like that, he believes you need to treat a woman. Okay, so that's basically the poem. If you look at the theme, it's the criticism of how men treated women in the past, power, gender roles, jealousy, insecurity, toxic relationships versus healthy relationships. The form and the structure, we already established that it is a dramatic monologue, and it is written in iambic pentameter, which has 5 beats in it, but you don't have to know that. You just need to know that it's iambic pentameter and rhyming couplets. So the fact that it has such a set structure, it means it's so tightly controlled. And this is reflective of the kind of control he wants to have over the women in his life, right? The enjambment creates a conversational tone. So although there's such a set structure, there's a lot of enjambment, meaning there's no punctuation at the end of the sentence. That creates a conversational tone. But that's also sinister because he's conversing about his disgusting belief systems and how he has committed murder, right? The tone is the attitude or the feelings of a poet. So he is proud, he's entitled, he's pretentious, he's a bragger, right? He's ruthless. What else can we say? He's apathetic. Apathetic is the opposite of empathetic, which is when you have empathy, kind, you care about people. The mood is how we feel about the poem. So we feel sympathetic for the wife. We feel disgust, right? We're disgusted at his treatment of his wife. We feel like he's controlling and narcissistic. We feel like he's vulgar, he's boastful, especially when he refers to the artists. He's threatening.